empty the chamber on them. And how do you do that? First 6 seconds, point A to point B, everything you got. Everything you got. Turn that shit up. Let's go.
Welcome to Scoop World Order. It is Friday. The team is heading up to East Lansing today. They have a huge test with Michigan State, first road game of the year. Very strange year given starting our first 5 games at home. That hasn't happened in a long time. But these guys get one of their 4 road games to get to kick it off against Michigan State, a team that has been a bit of a nemesis. But I had to look this up because when I was playing and throughout my time of really following Ohio State through recruiting stuff, I couldn't remember the last time we lost at East Lansing. It was 1999 up at Michigan State. So we've dominated this thing. Obviously, we had the loss in the Big Ten Championship in 13. We had the awful loss in 15. But we've pretty much dominated the series. I expect nothing less than domination on Saturday. But, they're still going to show up and play the game before they have a much-needed bye week to get the team healthy. So before I bring in my boy Nevadabuck, I appreciate you guys and girls so much. Thank you. Click subscribe, click like the content. It does a huge amount for our video. Comment. I need your score prediction. Ohio State, Michigan State. What are you going with? I'm going with, I think 49-21, 49-14, something like that. They get a couple of cheap late touchdowns like Wisconsin did. But I want to know, what are you thinking of the game? Do you have any anxiety about the game? But comment and also shout out where you guys are from. I love when you guys do that. You guys are doing that every video now, so it's really cool. I love seeing you guys that are from Canton, Akron, Naples, all over the place. All of our Southwest Florida people, we are thinking about you, praying about you on the scoop. I hope you guys are hanging in there. My in-laws are in Fort Myers, so it's very near and dear to my heart. So I'm thinking about you guys as well. So with that being said, going to bring in my friend Nevadabuck. Nevada, how are you tonight?
Doing great. Buckeyes coming off a really good week of work and getting ready to go up there to Michigan State, where, like I said, I know they haven't lost in 20 years, but you always got to be concerned about the potential ambush up there in East Lansing, and I'm expecting the Buckeyes to have a big effort and can't wait to see the game.
Yeah, Michigan State's traditionally been a very interesting opponent. When they had Mark D'Antonio, they were very, very Ohio-laden. He really recruited Ohio well, got some really good players up there. But they generally, I think they may have one player in William Golson, the defensive end. He plays for the Buccaneers. He's been in the league for like 10 years now. He's the only guy that I believe Ohio State offered, and he selected Michigan State. So it's kind of one of those games, like if there's tiers in the Big Ten, Ohio State is the top tier. This is like a middle tier type program. So generally, if you get offered by Michigan State and then Ohio State comes in after that, Ohio State supersedes it and kids go to Ohio State. There's been one kid in 20 years that's picked Michigan State over us. So generally, there's a pretty sizable talent gap. I think it's as big as ever right now. I'm not sure how much confidence there is up in East Lansing. They haven't played well. Generally, they've been really strong on defense and kind of middle of the pack to lower pack on offense. But this year, they're actually bottom. They're the bottom of the Big Ten in both. They're both, I believe, like 10th in offense and 11th in defense, which is a recipe for disaster. Nevada, how do you see this game playing out? Is there any bit of upset alert given some of the things that are going on? With the bye week coming up the following week, they've had blowout after blowout so far. This seems like a sleepy game. I don't think that Michigan State has the talent or the horses to make it interesting, but is there any thought that could actually happen?
Well, it would take a confluence of a lot of crazy events happening. It would take some bad calls. It would take some untimely turnovers. It would take some big plays in the special teams, which all can happen. We've all seen, fumbles pop up in the air and go back 98 yards for a touchdown. But it would take multiple things like that for Michigan State to keep it close. I've been saying all week, I think Ohio State's poised for a big effort. And, despite the fact that Ohio State's going for the first time on the road, despite the fact that Ohio State's got a bye week next week, I think the 2 biggest factors for Ohio State that are in their favor are they really didn't have a big emotional game last week. It was Rutgers. They kind of walked through that effort and kind of took care of business. And secondly, C.J. Stroud did not have a good game against Rutgers, and they're bound and determined to have him be sharp, to give him some opportunities for success this week. And I think Ryan Day is going to tailor the offense around CJ to let him put up some big numbers. And I think that all that adds up to a big Ohio State victory on Saturday up at Michigan State, and specifically big numbers in the passing game and big numbers for C.J. Stroud from a yardage and touchdown standpoint.
Yeah, I think that short of a CJ Stroud injury, I just don't know how this game stays close. I think that our domination across both lines will be very evident. But I always get a little wary. I remember we went up there in 2012. We weren't very good. That was Urban's signature. It's like one of the games in 2012 that kind of changed the course of the season. We went up, we beat Le'Veon Bell and a pretty decent Michigan State team. They weren't as good as they were a few years later, and they actually beat us the following year in 13 and then again in 15. But talk to me a little bit about the history, Nevada, of this rivalry. I personally, and I've been a part of some epic failures as an Ohio State football player, coach, whatever. I've been a part of some bad losses. To me, the worst loss in school history is the 2015 game, just because of the talent differential, the fact that we had the backup quarterback, it was in Columbus. They don't have their all Big Ten quarterback, Connor Cook. Talk to me a little bit about a couple of those upsets, 13 and 15. Obviously, I'm sure you had really high expectations going into those games. Michigan State came out and fought and won. What were your thoughts leading up to those games, and your thoughts, obviously, immediately after, other than just being distraught?
Well, you talk about the biggest. If you talk about the biggest upsets or the most disappointing games in recent memory as an Ohio State fan, it's really. I mean, for me, the top three come off, and I'd have to. Unless there's one that I'm missing, would be like you said, 13 Michigan State, 15 Michigan State, and then 1998 Michigan State. So it's amazing that it's the same team every time. You can talk about other games where a team might have risen up, Purdue or Iowa or even Michigan, but Michigan State, for me, probably three of the biggest upsets in my lifetime. And I think for Ohio State, though, not having Mark D'Antonio there, that makes a big difference. I mean, I thought Mark was an excellent coach for Michigan State. He might have been boring. He might have been, a little bit, his offense might have been a little bit stodgy, but they've always played great defense. Michigan State was always ready for Ohio State. And unfortunately, I think, Mel Tucker, I find the fact that they threw $95 million at Mel Tucker last year is absolutely fascinating, because at the time I didn't understand. When I heard the contract, I thought to myself, there must be something I'm missing. Like maybe somehow I forgot 3 years where he was the undefeated head coach or something. But then I looked at it and I'm like, no, this just doesn't make any sense why they did that. And now you have to wonder, as a Michigan State fan, you're sitting there with, a $95 million Mel Tucker. What did you get for your money, and where do we go from here? So I think Michigan State is a little bit at a crossroads, but they're kind of stuck because you're not going to buy that out. So what do you do? So I think the game will be interesting on Saturday. But I'm not sure if Mel Tucker's up to the task, and I know that Ryan Day is putting the hammer down the wicket for sure.
Yeah, for me with Mel, I know Mel. I really like Mel. Is he a head coach? I don't know. Is Michigan State a great job? I don't think so. I never think it's great to be the second tier team in state where the A-list top tier team is Michigan. So anytime there's a major player in Michigan or Ohio, I mean, obviously Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame kind of swallow all those up, and then there's been more and more kids going to the ACC and Clemson and the SEC, and I just I don't know. I mean, they beat Michigan. I think they got excited. It kind of was like when Charlie Weiss, almost beat USC in 2005, and all of a sudden there are all these NFL rumors, and Charlie Weiss, who's a genius, parlayed that into a massive 10-year extension. They almost beat USC, and they're just like, we better extend him for 10 years because otherwise every team's going to say, oh, he's going to the NFL and he's going to be a head coach. And so let's do this big deal. So then when he got whacked, he had a huge buyout. And I just think that, like, with some of these guys, when they haven't won a national title, they might have a signature win or a signature almost win, like Charlie Weiss did in the Bush Push game. But yeah, it's like that Michigan game was literally like a lottery ticket. The fact that they won that game. Kenneth Walker III was a great running back, had a great game. And then all of a sudden they start negotiating to give Mel this massive extension, a year into his contract, where he'd been a career assistant. He'd been an interim head coach a couple times in the NFL, and I love Mel. He was on staff when I was there. Great coach. He's upped his profile considerably since when he was a cornerbacks coach, a DBs coach at Ohio State. He obviously went and worked with Nick Saban, and then he went with Kirby Smart to be the DC at Georgia. But it's a lot easier to call the defense when you've got Georgia's talent versus Michigan State. Curious, Nevada, of all of because you've been around and you've seen some wild contracts for coaches. Was there one that was like as stunning to you as Mel Tucker's was, or were there other ones that were kind of in that stratosphere of like, are you kidding? They're really going to give that guy that kind of a deal?
Well, I mean, Mel's really stood out. I mean, it just stood out because it just came from absolutely nowhere. Typically, you're hearing about head coaching interest or, like you said, guys being linked to NFL jobs or to other major coaching jobs. You hear it all the time with Ohio State assistants. There's some rumors breaking lately about other schools kind of sniffing around Ohio State assistants for potential head coaching jobs. That's just part of the business. That happens every day, all the time, and nothing surprising about that. But the Mel Tucker thing, I mean, that's one of the largest contracts in college football history. And who else was bidding for Mel Tucker? Who else had even been linked to another job? I think that's what made it stunning. So, no, for me, it was really literally the most stunning contract proposal that I've seen in all my years of following college football. Will it be the last time? No, probably not. But it was the craziest one that I can ever remember.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you, because when you've got generally it's there's NFL teams sniffing around, and then some of these A-list blue blood programs like I guess I don't even know if I can't really say Nebraska and Wisconsin are A-list blue blood. They're probably the B-list, but they start sniffing around and potentially trying to poach your head coach, and then that's when the negotiating gets kicked into overdrive. But like you're right, I just feel like Michigan State with this one was like bidding against themselves. It's like let's just go lock up. It's like if you're dying to lock down someone that is great, but it isn't like someone that is a guy who's won multiple championships, is a true X factor type coach. So it's gonna be an interesting weekend. So we had some stuff on the coaching carousel the last couple of days with Tony Alford potentially interviewing with Colorado. Very, very informal stage of that. Obviously, Brian Hartline is going to be in hot demand. Nevada, you broke one of the biggest stories in the history of Ohio State football when you broke that Urban Meyer was going to be the next head coach at Ohio State. You predicted it would be at the Duke game. You nailed both, had it before anybody. Talk to me a little bit about how, at this time of the year, how does the coaching carousel work? How do the power players, because again, it's not, people like, there's always this distance between coaches and administrators and players, so that they can always have plausible deniability. So there's search firms involved, there's agencies involved. CAA obviously is the largest agency in the world. They represent Brian Hartline. Talk to me a little bit about how some of this stuff goes down at the highest levels, and explain to people why a guy like Urban Meyer could say, well, I never spoke to Ohio State until the Monday after they lost to Michigan, which was probably accurate, but it doesn't mean that he wasn't talking to, my people talking to your people type deal.
Well, that's the thing. They're always working through intermediaries. I mean, obviously the agent to agent or agent to representative things goes on all the time. I've even seen things where they have the agents on the phone and then they three-way call in the other party so they can say they weren't talking to them directly. And, it's all about plausible deniability at that stage. But, you just, as a fan, you just have to be realistic about these situations, in that I think a lot of guys have loyalty to Ohio State. A guy like Brian Hartline, let's talk specifically about Brian Hartline. Brian Hartline is really loyal to Ohio State, to Ryan Day, has got big ties to the Columbus area, his family, wife, kids, and whole 9 yards. But the idea that he's not going to be at least considering other opportunities is just silliness. We have to put that aside. So anybody who's trying to sell that to you, that he's not even considering that, you just have to discount them because they just don't know what they're talking about. The reality is He's going to be the recipient of offers. He's going to listen to them. He's either going to use those offers to, if he's really truly committed to Ohio State, which I really think he really wants to be, he'll parlay that into a longer term type of contract, a bigger title, more money, whatever it might be. But he's definitely going to listen. So anybody who's out there telling you, oh no, Brian Hartline would never ever listen to anything, it's just silly. And like I said, when I see that on the internet or on Twitter or I hear about other people talking about that, I just think it's them trying to spin a story to you, and we want to take you out of fantasy land and bring you into reality land. And reality land is people listen. That doesn't mean they act. That doesn't mean they operate. And I personally don't think Brian Hartline's going anywhere. But the idea that he wouldn't listen or at least use that opportunity like that to his advantage is kind of craziness.
Yeah, to me, it's just like Brian Kelly. Like Brian Kelly was the masterclass at the renegotiating when he'd go openly talk to the Eagles, he'd go openly talk to the Giants. I mean, Jim Harbaugh interviewed with the Minnesota Vikings on signing day. So I mean, and I'm not saying that Brian is either of those guys, but for Brian Kelly, I mean, he legitimately got like 5 raises over the course of his contract at Notre Dame because he's like, he drums up this NFL interest. And Brian's not that kind of guy. He's a lot more understated, but that's the game. If you want to make free money, have your agent call an agent and say, hey, are you interested? Or that's just what agents do. They have to drum up interest for their clients, see what prospective jobs are out there. And again, the thing about Brian is that, I think he's a great technical coach just because, his guys obviously translate fantastically to the NFL. There's a lot of separation when these guys run their routes. Top ends are fantastic. Releases. I think he's tough on the kids. But for me, the biggest thing about Brian is he's a team builder. He's a recruiter. And you look at some of these teams that have a dearth of talent, and you're like, man, what could we possibly do to get on Ohio State's levels? Like, you got to go find a guy who's a dynamic recruiter, and that's what Brian is. Brian, one of the top 3 or 4 recruiters in the entire country. So instead of him just recruiting his room, imagine if you gave him the money and the resources to recruit an area, say, because I mean the natives are getting very restless with Jimbo, and Jimbo's got $95 million at A&M. This is all just hyperbole. There's no truth to this, but say they go after Urban Meyer. Say Urban says, hey, you got to give this guy $3 million to be the offensive coordinator and recruit South Florida for me. Done. And then so he triples his money. He's in the SEC again. There's and again, it's good to have options. It's better to be Brian Hartline and have teams kicking your door in to make you a coordinator, or I don't think he's the head coaching thing is ready to happen. But Dabo went from being a wide receivers coach to a head coach. Urban went from Notre Dame's wide receiver coach to Bowling Green's head coach. And granted, they're different positions financially with Brian's his NFL career, but I think it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out. I think that Brian at some point has to go call plays somewhere. He has to become the guy who can write his name on an offense instead of just being a position coach. I think that's kind of the next step in the progression. And I don't see how Ryan Day would ever give that up because he's really good at doing that. So, I don't know why he would ever give that up. But that's just something that I think in Brian's career progression, that's the next logical step. Nevada, as we go through the coaching staff for the 2022 Buckeyes, who else do you think potentially could move? I know Justin Fry wants to be a head coach in the right circumstance. He really wants to be a head coach. He grew up. His dad was a high school football coach for decades. It's in his blood. His main ambition is to be a head coach. Tony Alford wants to be a head coach. I'm sure Corey Dennis does eventually at some point. He needs a little bit more seasoning than the other two. But talk to me about some guys you think would make great head coaches if they did leave Ohio State and they went elsewhere into the right situations.
Well, I think you kind of named them, but I think the only one that makes any sense for me in the short term from Ohio State fans' perspective is Tony Alford. Tony Alford's been around. He's kind of ready. He kind of checks a lot of boxes for a lot of teams. And I think, we shouldn't be surprised if something like that happens in the offseason. I know he's flirted with a couple jobs. He's been close a couple of times. I fully expect him to kind of hit one of those out. And I would not be surprised at all if this was his final season with Ohio State. Now, again, he might be back, and this may be all for naught. And, we're not trying to rush him out the door. He's been terrific for Ohio State, but he'd be the one that I had to put my money on wheel of awesome. I'd say it's going to be Tony Alford, and I think he'll have his choice on probably 2 or 3 jobs at year's end.
Yeah, and he's been with the program 7 years, put in his time. Excuse me, Justin Fry. Obviously, this is his first year, so general rule of thumb for assistant coaches is to a head coach, generally you give them 2 years, unless you're a Jeff Halfley supernova that's here for a year, and then he gets a great head coaching opportunity at Boston College. But yeah, it would be fascinating to see and what other jobs going to open up, because sometimes it's not always the ones that you see coming. Sometimes, it's like nobody this time thought Notre Dame was going to be open. And then all of a sudden, Brian Kelly goes to LSU. Like sometimes it's not always someone getting fired. It's somebody moving to what they deem to be a better job. So yeah, I know how this is. I've sat in the staff room. I was there when Jim Tressel got fired. I was there when Luke Fickell got fired and Urban was brought in. And I mean, I've lived it. I've seen it all. And it's an interesting experience. There's parts of it that are absolutely terrifying, especially for guys that are squatters and they're not sure if they're going to be retained or not. Thankfully, I was retained, but the other grad assistant with me was not. He was fired. So you just never know. It's going to be interesting. So final thoughts, Nevada. We're about 24 hours out from kickoff. Give me quick little score prediction. How do you see the game playing out? And no Buckeye football next week, so we're gonna have to savor Saturday. It looks like.
Yeah, no, I think earlier in the week, I think I was in the 50s for Ohio State. I think I'm going to knock that down a little bit. I'll say like 45-7 Ohio State, and the only reason I'll say that is because I think that Ryan Day took some grief about potentially running up the score, leaving the starters in a little bit too much, and I think that he'll back off of that. I think Stroud will get his stuff, relatively early and be out by the end of the third quarter. And I think we'll just run out of time to score more points. But I think it'll be a comfortable win, barring something just crazy. That I just don't see any reason that this game should be close on either side of the ball. And I think, most importantly, I think Ryan Day has been treating this almost like a bowl week prep this week, really pushing the guys hard. And I think Jim Knowles and him will have the guys ready for Saturday. And I'm expecting a big effort.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be clear skies on Saturday. Only a 6% chance of rain, which is great. I always like to look at the weather forecast before I do one of these because I don't want to say, it's going to be 56-10, and then it's like a monsoon, and then they can't throw the ball. So that I always like to check the weather. Yeah, I think it'll probably be, like 42-14. I just don't think that Michigan State has any firepower whatsoever. I think that their O-line is struggling. It's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, then we got a nice bye week. So, the guys get to go home, see their families, go to the high school game, kind of do the whole shebang and get out of Dodge for a minute. These coaches, I know there's nobody on earth that loves bye weeks more than the coaches because they go recruit for a little bit, but then they get to spend Saturday, Sunday at home, or at least Saturday. They get to spend it as a college football fan watching the games with their family. So that'll be good. So with that being said, I'll wrap this thing up. As always, we appreciate you guys. We are going to be on the board all day, all night. BuckeyeScoop.com. Comment. I want your score predictions and shout out where you're from, as always. And if you enjoy this, please click the like. It is huge for us. It drives a lot of traffic for us. So please click that like. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great weekend. We likely are going to be doing a game watch party, so tune into that. Follow us on Twitter at Buckeye Scoop, no space, just Buckeye Scoop. And also follow our Instagram. We are growing those, making a big time effort for that. If you guys are into the audio version of this, find us on Apple Podcasts. We have the Morning Scoop. We have multiple podcasts. Search Buckeye Scoop, search Morning Scoop. Leave us a 5-star review. Those are huge helps for us. Our channels have been growing like crazy. Thanks to you guys spreading the word. So thank you guys as always. So thank you, Buckeye Nation. You guys have a great rest of your day. And also thank you, Scoop family. Go Bucks.